They call Antarctica the quietest place on Earth. They tell you it's a continent of peace, of science, a pristine white canvas where nations put aside their differences to study the climate, the ice, the history of our planet. That is a lie. The silence down here isn't peaceful, it's heavy. It presses against your eardrums like the crushing depth of the ocean. It's a silence that is waiting, watching. My name is Miller. For 20 years, I worked private security for mining operations in places you don't want to visit. The Congo, Siberia, the Darien Gap. I thought I had seen the worst nature could throw at a man. But I was wrong. 2 years ago, I was contracted by a joint task force, Russian and American private interests, to oversee security at a black site research station known as Outpost 9. It sat directly above Lake Vostok, a subglacial body of water buried under 4 kilometers of ancient ice. We weren't there to study the climate. We were there to drill. The geological scans had picked up something anomalous near the bedrock, a pocket of liquid that shouldn't have been liquid. We went down to retrieve a sample. We thought we were drilling into history. Instead, we drilled into a prison cell. This is the recording of what happened during the final 72 hours of Outpost 9. If you are listening to this, the quarantine has failed, and you need to burn this tape. To understand what happened, you have to understand the isolation. Outpost 9 wasn't like McMurdo or Vostok Station. Those places are cities compared to where we were. We were 300 miles from the nearest human soul, perched on a plateau of ice that shifted and groaned under our feet like a sleeping giant. The temperature outside averaged 60 degrees below zero. At that temperature, machinery breaks, fuel turns to gel, and exposed skin dies in seconds. But inside the HAB module, it was always a humid, sweating 70 degrees, smelling of recycled air, instant coffee, and unwashed bodies. There were 12 of us, 6 scientists, 4 engineers, and 2 security personnel, myself and a kid named Sarah. Our job was simple: keep the peace, keep the scientists from killing each other, and ensure that whatever we pulled up didn't leave the room without authorization. The centerpiece of the station was the rig. It was a monstrosity of steel and hydraulics, drilled directly through the floor of the main hangar. For 3 weeks, that drill had been screaming, a never-ending high-pitched whine that vibrated through your boots, through the floor, and eventually into your teeth. You couldn't sleep without hearing it. You couldn't eat without feeling it. It became the heartbeat of the station. On the morning of the incident, I was in the command center, watching the monitors with Dr. Aris, the project lead. Aris was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a decade. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with red, and he had a nervous tick of tapping his pen against his clipboard. "Depth," Aris barked into the intercom. The voice of Petrov, the chief engineer, crackled back. 3,980 meters. We are approaching the target zone, Doctor. The ice density is changing. It is getting softer. "Keep the pressure steady," Aris ordered, leaning closer to the screens. "Do not breach the pocket too fast. If we crack the seal violently, we lose the pressure differential." I looked at the telemetry data on the screen. The drill bit was nearly 4 kilometers down. Think about that. 4 kilometers of solid ice pressing down on a metal tube no wider than a dinner plate. The pressure readings were off the charts. It was enough to crush a submarine like a soda can. "Doctor," I said, stepping forward. "The sensors on the outer casing are spiking. Vibration is increasing. Maybe we should throttle back? If that bit snaps down there, we're done." Aris didn't even look at me. "We are not throttling back, Miller. We are 72 hours behind schedule. The window of opportunity is closing. The satellite scans show the anomaly is shifting. If we don't tag it now, we might miss it entirely." "Anomaly?" I asked. This was new. "I thought we were drilling for water samples, ancient bacteria." Aris finally turned to me. His smile was thin, devoid of humor. "You are here to shoot polar bears if they get lost, Miller. Leave the science to us. Just know that what is down there, it has been isolated from the rest of the biosphere for 15 million years. It is pure, untouched." I didn't like the way he said pure. Suddenly, the rig groaned. It was a sound I had never heard before, a deep metallic screech that sounded like the station itself was being torn in half. The lights in the command center flickered. The coffee cup on the console danced toward the edge. "Petrov, report!" Aris yelled. "We hit a cavity!" Petrov's voice was frantic, shouting over the roar of the machinery. "The drill dropped! 3 meters! Free fall! We are through the ice shelf! We are in the liquid!" "Stabilize!" Aris screamed, his eyes wide with a mix of terror and ecstasy. "Engage the locking clamps! Seal the borehole! Don't let the pressure blow back!" The floor beneath us bucked. I grabbed the railing to keep from falling. The screaming of the drill changed pitch, winding down from a high whine to a low, churning grind. Then, silence. The sudden lack of noise was deafening. My ears were ringing. For a moment, nobody moved. We just stared at the depth gauge. 4,002 meters. "Status?" Aris whispered. Petrov's voice came back, breathless. "We are stable. The seal is holding. The probe is in the water, or whatever liquid this is. Sensors are reading temperature, -3 degrees. Salinity is high. Oxygen content is 0. "Start the pump," Aris said. His hands were shaking. "Bring up the sample." I walked over to the reinforced glass window that looked down into the drilling bay. The engineers were moving around the rig like ants, checking valves and pressure lines. They looked terrified. "Miller," Aris said, his voice low. "I want full lockdown. No one enters or leaves the drilling bay without a hazmat suit. Level 4 protocols." "Doctor," I said, "Level 4 is for bioweapons. We're drilling for water." "Just do it," he snapped. I keyed my radio. "Sarah, lock down the bay doors. Initiate decontamination cycle. We're bringing something up." I watched as the massive hydraulic winch began to turn, pulling the miles of cable back up from the abyss. It would take hours to bring the sample container to the surface. Hours of waiting. Hours of listening to the wind howl outside, sounding more and more like voices screaming to be let in. I went down to the bay to oversee the security. The air down there felt different. It was colder, despite the heaters. There was a smell, faint, but distinct. It smelled like ozone and old copper, like a thunderstorm trapped in a bottle. As the winch groaned, pulling the final segment of the drill string into the chamber, I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach, a primal instinct that I had ignored for the paycheck. We shouldn't have opened that door. Some doors are locked for a reason, but curiosity is a disease, and we were all terminal. The sample was about to arrive, and God help us, we were ready to welcome it. The extraction process took 4 hours. 4 hours of watching the cable winch drum turn, layer by layer, pulling our prize from the crushing dark. The mood in the drilling bay was brittle. No one was joking. No one was talking about what they'd do with the bonus money. The engineers, Petrov, and a young guy named Jensen stood by the borehole with thermal blankets and containment drums, looking like priests waiting for a coffin. "Casing breach in 10 meters, Petrov announced, his voice tinny through the comms loop. "Prepare the airlock. Sarah, Miller, weapons tight. If the pressure seal blows, we're going to have a lot of flying debris." I gripped my MP5. It felt ridiculous holding a submachine gun against a hole in the ground. What was I going to shoot? The ice? But Aris had insisted on full security protocols. He was pacing back and forth, rubbing his hands together. He wasn't scared. He was hungry. He looked like an addict waiting for a fix. Clank. The winch stopped. The massive titanium cylinder, 3 meters long and covered in frost, hung suspended over the open borehole. Steam hissed from the joints where the warm air of the bay hit the super-cooled metal of the canister. "Seal the hole!" Aris shouted. "Secure the sample!" Petrov and Jensen moved in, engaging the magnetic clamps. They lowered the cylinder onto a heavy-duty trolley. It radiated cold. I could feel it from 10 feet away, a sharp, biting chill that cut right through my thermal fatigues. It wasn't just temperature. It felt like the air around the cylinder was dying. "To the lab, now," Aris ordered. We escorted the trolley through the decontamination corridors. The lights flickered as we passed. The station's generator was acting up again. Or maybe it was just the magnetic field of the core interfering with the electrical grid. Inside the biolab, the atmosphere was sterile white. It was a stark contrast to the grime of the drill bay. This was Aris's kingdom. We helped load the cylinder into the primary containment chamber, a sealed glass box with glove ports and robotic manipulator arms. Initiating opening sequence, Aris said, his face pressed against the glass. The automated latches on the cylinder clicked open. Hiss, a plume of pressurized gas escaped. Nitrogen and argon used to preserve the sample. The metal casing split down the middle and fell away. I don't know what I expected. A tube of clear blue ice? Maybe some ancient sediment, brown and rocky? What lay on the tray was void. It was a cylinder of ice, yes, but it was black. Not dark gray, not muddy. It was absolute, Vanta black. It seemed to absorb the harsh fluorescent lights of the laboratory. It didn't reflect anything. It was like looking into a hole in the fabric of reality, and it wasn't solid. "Look at the structure," Dr. Sobek, the team's biologist, whispered. She sounded horrified. It's fractal." I stepped closer, keeping my hand on my weapon. Inside the black ice, there were veins, thin, spiderweb fractures of a lighter, violet hue that seemed to pulse very faintly. It looked like a nervous system frozen in time. "It's beautiful," Aris murmured. "It's wrong," I said. "Ice doesn't look like that, Doctor. That's not water." "It is water," Aris corrected, checking the spectrometer readings on his tablet. H2O, but the molecular bond, it's hexagonal, but twisted. The hydrogen atoms are aligned in a way I've never seen. It's hyperdense. "Is it safe?" Sarah asked from the door. She looked pale. "It's dead, Sarah," Aris scoffed. "It's been at 300 atmospheres of pressure and minus 20 degrees for 15 million years. Nothing survives that." He reached into the glove ports. His hands, encased in thick rubber, hovered over the black core. He grabbed a scalpel tool. "Taking the first sample for microscopy," he announced. He touched the black ice. At the moment of contact, a sound resonated through the room, a low-frequency thrum that we felt in our chests more than we heard. The lights in the lab surged, brighter, then dimmer. "Did you feel that?" I asked, stepping back. "Static discharge." Aris dismissed it, scraping a flake of the black substance onto a slide. "Just static." But I saw it, just for a microsecond. Where the scalpel had touched the core, the black veins didn't just break. They recoiled. They pulled back like a living thing avoiding a needle. "Aris," I said, my voice warning. "Don't touch it again." We spent the next 6 hours in that lab. I instituted a rotation for security. Sarah took the door. I watched the scientists. I didn't trust Aris, and I certainly didn't trust that black rock on the table. They raised the temperature in the containment chamber slowly. -10 degrees, -5, 0. Normal ice would be melting by now. It would be a puddle of water. But the Vostok core didn't melt. It sweated. Thick, viscous droplets of black sludge began to bead on the surface of the cylinder. They didn't run down the sides. They pooled together, merging, coagulating. Dr. Sobek was glued to the electron microscope. "Aris, look at this," she called out. Her voice was trembling. "The cellular structure, it's waking up." "Bacteria?" Aris asked, looking over her shoulder. "No," Sobek said. "It's not bacteria. It's not a virus. It doesn't have a cell wall. It's mimetic." "English, Doctor," I interrupted from the corner. Sobek turned to me. She looked terrified. "It doesn't have its own DNA, Miller. It's a blank slate. Whatever it touches, it becomes. It copies the molecular structure of its environment. Right now, it's copying the silica of the glass slide." "So it's a chameleon," I said. "No," she shook her head. "A chameleon changes color to hide. This changes structure to consume." Suddenly, a loud crack came from the containment unit. We all spun around. The black cylinder had split open. The heat had finally done its work. The core had collapsed into a pile of that black, oily sludge. It sat in the glass box, a shimmering puddle of darkness, but it wasn't sitting still. "Is the ventilation on?" Jensen asked. "The liquid is moving." He was right. The puddle was rippling, but there was no fan in the box. The air was still. The sludge was moving against gravity. It was slowly, inch by inch, climbing the glass walls of the containment unit. It was seeking the heat source, the internal lights of the box. "Kill the power to the box!" I yelled. "Freeze it down!" "No!" Aris shouted, blocking the control panel. "Look at it! It's reacting to thermal stimuli. It's intelligent behavior." "It's trying to get out, you idiot!" I shoved Aris aside and slammed my hand on the emergency cooling override. The liquid nitrogen jets hissed, blasting the chamber with freezing mist. The black sludge instantly slowed. It stopped climbing. It hardened, turning back into a brittle, glossy shell on the side of the glass. The room was silent, save for Aris's heavy breathing. "You ruined the experiment," Aris spat at me. "I saved your life," I retorted. "That thing was looking for a way out." "It's just chemical reactions," Aris insisted, though he looked less sure now. "Heat causes expansion." "It wasn't expanding, Doctor," Sarah said from the doorway. Her weapon was raised, pointing at the glass box. "It was hunting." I walked up to the glass. The black frost covered the inside, obscuring the view, but I could see a shape in the center. It had reformed. It wasn't a cylinder anymore. It had taken a shape that looked disturbingly like a human hand, pressing against the glass from the inside. And then the intercom buzzed. It was Petrov, down in the engineering deck. "Command, this is engineering," Petrov said. His voice was odd, flat, monotone. "We have a problem with the secondary heater. I need assistance." "Copy, Petrov," I replied. "What kind of problem?" "There is leakage," Petrov said. "Black water. It came from the pipes. It is warm." My blood ran cold. The sample in the lab was contained, but the drill string was still connected to the void below. "Miller," Sobek whispered, looking at the microscope screen again. "The sample I took, it's gone." "What do you mean gone?" "The slide is empty," she said. "It absorbed the glass. It ate the slide." I looked at her gloved hands. There was a tiny, microscopic tear in the rubber of her left index finger. A small, black smudge, no bigger than a pinhead, was on her skin. She followed my gaze. She saw the black spot. She didn't scream. She just looked at me, and her eyes began to fill with black tears. "Miller," she whispered. "It's loud. It's so loud in my head." "Miller," Dr. Sobek said again. But this time, her voice didn't tremble. It didn't sound like a terrified woman anymore. It sounded layered, like two people speaking at the exact same time, slightly out of sync. The black spot on her finger wasn't a spot anymore. It was a vine. I watched in horror as a thick black vein shot up her wrist, disappearing under the sleeve of her lab coat. Her skin paled instantly, turning the color of gray ash. "Step away from her!" I shouted, leveling my MP5 at her chest. "Aris, get back!" "Don't shoot!" Aris screamed, throwing himself in front of her. "She's in shock. It's a chemical reaction." "It's not chemical, you fool!" I yelled. "Look at her eyes!" Sobek looked up. The whites of her eyes were gone. They were entirely black, Vantablack, like the core. But she wasn't screaming. She wasn't fighting it. She was smiling. A calm, serene smile that didn't reach those dead eyes. "We are awake," she said. Not I. We. Then, her body glitched. There is no other way to describe it. Her shoulder joint popped with a wet crack and rotated backward, an angle impossible for a human. Her jaw unhinged, dropping 3 inches too low. "Help me!" The voice changed. It was Petrov's voice coming out of Sobek's mouth. Then it shifted again. It was my voice. "Miller, don't shoot! Help me!" It was cycling through the sounds it had heard, testing them like a radio tuner finding a frequency. "Move, Aris!" I kicked the scientist aside and squeezed the trigger. Pop, pop, pop. 3 rounds to the chest. Sobek didn't fall. The impact pushed her back against the lab counter, shattering beakers. Blood didn't spray. Instead, a thick black tar oozed from the bullet holes. The substance moved, knitting the flesh back together instantly. The bullets were pushed out of her body, clattering onto the floor like discarded coins. It lunged. It wasn't a run, it was a fluid motion, like water flowing uphill. She cleared the distance between us in a blur. I felt a hand, cold as ice and hard as iron, grip my throat. I was lifted off my feet. I looked into her face. The skin was rippling, reshaping itself. For a second, I saw my own face looking back at me from her skull. Inefficient form, the thing whispered with Sobek's mouth. Too fragile. Blam! A shotgun blast roared from the doorway. Sarah. The shot took Sobek's arm off at the elbow. The grip on my throat broke, and I fell to the floor, gasping for air. The severed arm on the floor didn't die. It started crawling towards the main body. Out! Move! Now! Sarah screamed, pumping another shell into the chamber. I grabbed Aris by the collar of his coat and dragged him towards the door. Sobek, or the thing wearing her skin, was shrieking now. It wasn't a human scream. It was the sound of grinding metal, the sound of the drill, the sound of the wind. We slammed the heavy blast door of the biolab shut and spun the locking wheel. Thud, thud, thud. Something massive slammed against the steel from the inside. The metal buckled slightly. Seal it, I wheezed, my throat burning. Override the lock. Sarah smashed the keypad with the butt of her shotgun. Sparks flew. The door was dead. We stood in the corridor, panting. The red emergency lights were strobing now. The alarm was deafening. What was that? Aris whispered, sliding down the wall. He was shaking violently. That wasn't biology. It's a mimic, Sarah said, her eyes wide. It learns, it repairs, and it's fast. Petrov, I said, remembering the call. Petrov is down in engineering. If that thing is in the pipes, he's already gone. As if on cue, the intercom crackled. Command, this is Petrov, the voice said. It was calm, too calm. Why are the alarms on? Is there a fire? Please, open the blast doors. It is cold down here. I looked at Sarah. She shook her head slowly. Petrov, I said into my radio, staring at the locked door of the lab where the banging had stopped. What is your wife's name? Silence. Then a low, wet chuckle came over the speaker. We do not have a wife, the voice said, but we have her memories. She tasted sweet. The radio cut to static. We retreated to the command center. It was the only room with independent life support and reinforced bulkheads. There were only 4 of us left. Me, Sarah, Aris, and Jensen, the young engineer who had been lucky enough to be in the mess hall when hell broke loose. Jensen was crying. He was curled up under a console, clutching a wrench. We have to call for evac, Aris said, frantically typing on the comm station. We need a bird in the air now. Stop. I grabbed his hand. Think, Doctor. If we call a helicopter and one of those things gets on board, we bring this to the mainland. We bring this to civilization. I don't care, Aris screamed. I want to live. Sit down. I shoved him into a chair. Nobody leaves until we know who is who. The station groaned. The wind outside had picked up to hurricane force, a whiteout storm. Even if we wanted to leave, nothing could fly in this weather. We were trapped in a tin can with a monster that could look like a friend. The ventilation, Sarah whispered, looking up at the grate in the ceiling. The lab, it's connected to the main vents. I shone my flashlight up into the duct. Nothing but darkness and dust. It can liquefy, I said. We saw it. It can turn into slime and move through the pipes. We need to cut the heat, I realized. The cold slows it down. In the lab, the nitrogen stopped it. It feeds on thermal energy. If we cut the heat, Jensen stammered, we'll freeze to death in 3 hours. Better than being eaten, Sarah muttered. Suddenly, the lights in the command center died. We were plunged into total darkness. Backup power, I yelled. Get the emergency generator. But the generator didn't kick in. In the dark, I heard breathing. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Sarah's. It was a wet, rattling breath, coming from the corner of the room where the ventilation shaft was. Drip, drip, drip. Something viscous was dripping onto the floor. "Flashlights!" I ordered. 3 beams of light cut through the dark. We swept the room. There, hanging from the ceiling vent like a spider, was a mass of black slime. It was dripping down, forming a shape on the floor. It rose up. It took a form. It looked like me. It was wearing my face. It was wearing my uniform. It was even holding a shape that looked like my gun. "Miller?" Jensen asked, looking from me to the thing. He was confused. The panic had broken his mind. "Which one is you?" The thing smiled. My smile. "I am Miller," it said, and it sounded exactly like me. Perfect pitch. Perfect cadence. "No," I said, raising my weapon. "You're just a recording." "We are the future," the thing said. "You are just meat. Warm meat." It stepped forward. I saw its skin ripple. Underneath the camouflage of my face, thousands of black tendrils were writhing. "Jensen, get back!" Sarah yelled. But Jensen didn't move. He walked towards the thing. "Miller, you're going to get us out, right?" "Yes," the thing said, opening its arms. "Come here, Jensen. It is warm inside." "Don't!" I screamed. But it was too late. Jensen touched the thing's hand. Instantly, the mimicry dropped. The Miller shape exploded into a mess of black spikes. They impaled Jensen through the chest, the neck, the eyes. He didn't even have time to scream. The black mass engulfed him, pulling him into itself, adding his biomass to its own. "Fire!" I roared. We opened up. In the confined space, the noise was deafening, but we weren't fighting a man. We were fighting a shape-shifting cancer that occupied the whole room. "The door! To the generator room!" Aris yelled, unlocking the rear bulkhead. We scrambled through, leaving Jensen to be digested by the darkness. We slammed the door and welded it shut with a thermal cutter. We were safe for the moment, but we were in the unheated section of the station. The temperature here was already dropping past 0. I looked at Sarah. I looked at Aris. "Check your skin," I said, panting, my breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "Check for cuts. Check for black spots." Because I knew the truth now. It didn't just kill you. It replaced you. And the worst part, I wasn't 100% sure that I hadn't been touched in the chaos. We were huddled in the maintenance bay. The temperature inside had dropped to -40. My eyelashes were freezing together every time I blinked. Aris was in the corner, wrapped in 3 thermal blankets, rocking back and forth. He was muttering equations. He was trying to calculate a way out, but there was no math that could solve this. We can reroute the coolant," Aris stammered, his lips blue. If we flush the system, maybe we can get enough heat to the comms array." "No," I said. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Hypothermia was setting in, the warm, fuzzy stage where you just want to sleep. If we turn the heat on, it wakes up. Sarah was sitting next to the heavy blast door. She had her shotgun across her lap, but her fingers were too frozen to pull the trigger. "It's quiet," she whispered. She was right. The banging on the other side of the door had stopped. The scratching noises in the vents had ceased. The cold was doing its job. It was putting the monster back to sleep. "We have to finish it," I said, forcing myself to stand up. My legs felt like blocks of wood. "We have to kill the generator, completely. Make this station a tomb." "You're crazy!" Aris tried to stand up, stumbling. "You're killing us! I have a family! I have a Nobel Prize waiting for me! You have a parasite waiting for you!" I yelled, shoving him back. "Look at the door, Aris! Look!" Under the crack of the blast door, a thin tendril of black slime had seeped through before freezing solid. It looked like a black icicle. It had stopped inches from our boots. "If that thing gets out," I said, pointing at the frozen sludge, "if a rescue team finds a warm station with that thing inside, it reaches the ocean. It reaches the biomass of the planet. It mimics everything. The fish, the birds, the people. Game over." I limped over to the main breaker panel. It was labeled Total System Shutdown. "Don't," Aris pleaded, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Please, I don't want to die in the dark." "We're not dying in the dark, Doc. Sarah said softly. She clicked on a chemical flare. It hissed, casting a stark red light over the frozen room. "We're just going to sleep." I looked at Sarah. She nodded. I grabbed the lever. It was cold enough to burn my skin. "For the record," I said to the tape recorder in my pocket, "my name is Jack Miller, Security Chief. Outpost 9 remains under quarantine, indefinitely." I pulled the lever. Clunk. The last hum of the generator died. The emergency lights faded. The only light left was Sarah's red flare. The silence returned. The absolute crushing silence of Antarctica. We sat down together against the far wall. Aris was weeping softly until the cold took his energy. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder. "Miller?" she whispered. "Yeah? Do you think it hurts? Freezing?" "No," I lied. "It's like falling asleep in the snow. It's peaceful." We sat there as the frost began to creep up our legs. I watched the red flare sputtering on the floor. The shadows danced. For a second, I thought I saw the black icicle under the door move. Just a twitch. But it was too cold now, even for that. My eyes felt heavy. The cold wasn't biting anymore. It felt like a heavy blanket. "Good night, Sarah," I whispered. She didn't answer. I closed my eyes, and I listened to the wind. Location: Outpost 9, Antarctica. Time: 6 months after the incident. Unit: Recovery Team. Delta. Command, this is Delta Lead. We have breached the facility, entering the maintenance sector. The lights of our tactical flashlights cut through the gloom. The station is a freezer. The walls are covered in 2 inches of ice. We found them in the generator room, 3 bodies, frozen solid. Identities confirmed, my second in command says, checking the tags. Dr. Aris, Security Officer Sarah Vance, and Chief Miller. They look peaceful, like statues carved out of ice. Miller is holding a tape recorder in his frozen hand. "Bag them," I order. "Carefully, don't break anything." "Sir," a Marine calls out from the blast door. "You need to see this." I walk over to the door they welded shut. Underneath the crack, there is a black stain. It looks like oil, but as I shine my light on it, the light doesn't reflect. It gets absorbed. "What is that?" the Marine asks. I look closer. The black stain is frozen, but deep inside it, trapped in the ice, I can see shapes, tiny microscopic veins. "Radiation check?" I ask. "Normal, sir, but thermal scans are weird. That spot. It's slightly warmer than the surrounding ice, like 0.1 degrees warmer. It's generating its own heat. It's trying to thaw itself out, even after 6 months at minus 60 degrees. "Back away," I order, unholstering my flare gun. "Do not touch the black ice." I take Miller's tape recorder. I press play. The battery is dead, but we'll recover the data. I look around the station. This wasn't a research facility. It was a containment breach. And these 3 people, they didn't die from an accident. They executed themselves to keep the lid on the jar. "Command," I say into my radio. "Mark this site as a biohazard level 5. Do not recover the bodies. Do not recover the samples. Repeat, Delta Lead." I said, "Bury it," I whisper, looking at the black vein pulsing faintly in the ice. "Bury it under concrete, and pray the ice caps don't melt. Because if this ice goes, we all go. This is Captain Nightwhisper. The Vostok void is not empty, it is full, and it is waiting for the world to get just a little bit warmer. Sleep well, and keep your windows closed."